All right, the last thing I want to build out is the concept of gear. And I'm getting this from Strava. So basically, with Strava, they allow you to add like your shoes, for example, and from there you can assign your shoe to an activity, and then it'll calculate how many miles you've run on that particular shoe, and then you'll get an email if you want, and it will just tell you how many. It'll tell you like, okay, you're at 300 miles on these pairs of shoes, or this pair of shoe. You should buy a new pair, something like that. So I'm gonna go in here. I'm just gonna call it shoe model, and we'll go into our editor, run git fetch, and git checkout shoe model. And let's just run git branch again. Yeah, let's get rid of the total UI. So git branch, delete, and total UI. Clear that out. So let's think of our generation here. So we want to do Rails generate model shoe. It should have a name of string. It should also have a distance in miles. And this will be calculated similar to what we do with our activities and more specifically our totals. So a user won't actually be able to do this. This will happen through a callback. We'll just set that to a decimal. Let's see here. I might even add some precision in here. Let's see here. So instead of 5, I might do 6, and we'll set it to 2. This just being because it's not unreasonable for someone to have like maybe 1,000 miles on their shoes, but having like 10,000 would be pretty ridiculous. So I'm gonna cap it off at that. So they need a name, distance in miles, which would be a decimal. We also should probably have, oh, you know what? We want to have retired, and that'll be Boolean. And this is so Strava. I'm getting this from Strava, but Strava lets you retire a shoe versus deleting it. And retiring it, you can kind of think of it as like a soft delete, but it's just a way for you to be like, I'm not using this shoe anymore. But instead of it like being deleted from the database and like not being available to you to see anymore, it's just no longer available as a shoe for you to associate an activity with. But you can always go back and like I guess you could even bring that shoe back to life. But I'm gonna add that field. We also need a notification column. So this would be the threshold in which you want to be notified. So like if you say like notify me when I hit 100 miles, then that's what would be used to do that. I'm just trying to think of what to call it because everything's gonna get saved in distance to miles. So, and I'm just trying to think of like if and how we would future proof this in case somebody is in Europe using this and they're using kilometers and not miles. Trying to We could have a field for the unit and a field or a column for the unit and a column for the distance, and then that'd probably be more flexible, and then we could just use that information. I think for now though, what I'm gonna do is just probably set it to like just one column for now. So notify me at, that's not too expressive. Maybe like threshold distance in miles, maybe, or maybe even not threshold distance, but max distance in miles. Is that a good name for it? It's kind of hard to know. How about like allowed distance in miles? I guess we can just do that, and I'll just set that to an integer. Okay, let's see here. We got the name of the model, and then we have column of name will be set to string. Distance in miles, that's decimal. Retired will be a boolean, and allowed distance in miles, and that'll be an integer. Let's go ahead and run this. All right, now let's check out the migration file because we're going to want to do a few adjustments in here. So the name, we want to make sure there's actually a value. Let's do null false. Distance in miles. For this, we can do a default of 0. Retired, let's do a default of 0. And let's also make sure that there's a value, so null false. Let's see, what else do we have in here? Allowed distance in miles. We're actually going to leave this blank, so if a user does not fill this column out, well, I should say the opposite. If this does have a value, then we're going to go ahead and email the user when it reaches that distance. But if they can leave it blank. So that's good. Let's just save that. I want to make sure we spell everything right. So name, distance in miles. Those are the same. All right, so let's do Rails DB migrate. Cool. Now the other thing we want to do is on the other end of this, we want to associate a shoe with an activity. So every activity can have a shoe. So we have to add a new column to that. So let's just do Rails generate migration add shoe to activities, and we'll do shoe references. And let's pop this open. So there's the column, and there's the table, I should say, and there's the new column. So let's go ahead and run this. So Rails DB migrate. Okay, so strong migrations doesn't like this. So adding a foreign key blocks writes on both tables. Okay, and again, this has to do with like even though our app isn't really in production yet. I mean, it is up on Heroku, but no one's using it yet. But the whole point of strong migrations is eventually I would have to run this on production. Let's just imagine that people actually use my application, and there's like 1,000 people actually logged into the application when I need to run this migration. What I'm understanding from this message is if I don't make these updates to the actual migration, it could lock the database. So if there's 1,000 people on my site, and let's just say like during the time of migration, they're all going in and like either adding an activity or updating some other thing, it may not actually save to the database because the database will be blocked during this migration. So let's just go ahead and copy this, clear that out, run that again. Okay, it's because null false is set here. So here's the problem. We have activities already, right? We already made this table here. And there's already activities in our database, in our test database, I should say. I actually haven't added any in our production, but that doesn't matter because these same rules would apply. So the problem here is, I'm glad this actually threw a fit because it made me realize we actually don't want to require this particular column. So in the migration file, you can see it's saying like it's prohibiting null values, but the problem is there's already like a couple hundred activities in our database, and they do not have, there's no shoe associated with them, and therefore they have a null value. And Postgres is actually, this is coming from Postgres, not Rails, and Postgres is like, it's not cool with that because we're saying you need to have a value. The more I think about this though, we do not actually need to have a value. I'm going to get rid of that because you could add an activity and not assign a shoe to it, and therefore it's okay to not have a value. So I'm going to get rid of that line, and I'm actually glad this caught it because I kind of forgot to do that. So let's clear this out. Cool. Let's just check out the schema file. So you can see down here we have these new columns and indexes added. But you can see null false has not been set to it. And we also have the shoes table, which is right here. And this, is there a foreign key? There's not a foreign key. Okay, so this is good. The next thing I want to do is just go into activities, or activity, and I'm going to say has one shoe optional true. So it can have a shoe, but it doesn't actually, like, it's optional, it doesn't have to. And let me actually check the docs for that, because I think we can do this. Okay, so it's actually, I'm glad I checked this out. So belongs to is the method that can be passed optional true. So let's go ahead and get rid of this. So we'll keep has one shoe. But let's go into the shoe, and this should be belongs to activity optional true. Let's clear this out. Let's just run our test suite. We didn't actually write any tests, but running our test suite sometimes catches problems with new models. Let's just do Rails T. Okay, everything passed, so that's good. Let's just commit all this for now. So let's do git status, git add, and git commit. And we'll say create shoe model and associate with activity model. And we'll go ahead and push that up.